Welcome back, everyone, to Tuesday Afternoon Networking. My name is Coco T.A.N. I'm a full-service real estate expert with Keller Realty in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our topic today is all about how to select the right property manager for you, since everybody's criteria is different. If you remember, our last T.A.N seminar was about building your dream home. And there will be another one coming up with a real estate attorney talking about contingencies, especially in the shifting market. First, as a reminder for the new attendees, on the wall are QR codes that you can scan to connect with me on social media. It helps me if you subscribe to my YouTube. The other code is for WeChat. You can stay up to date with my new off-market listings and seminar announcements if you are on my private WeChat group. Connect with me and I will add you to my WeChat group, or you can email me to be added to my mailing list for the seminar announcement. Today, we're talking about relationships, but not family relationships. We're talking about the mutually beneficial relationship between rental property owners and their property managers. We're joined by a panel of hosts and property managers. Let's welcome Airbnb superhost Cindy Lin and Emily Chen, property managers Allison Dean, and social entrepreneur and investor Chao Lu. Let's start with the host side, okay? To the host, hi Cindy, hi Emily, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, great. So Cindy, what are the qualities for, if you think, what is a great PM or what is a right PM for you as a host?
For me, is can earn me revenues and then don't bring me headache.
That's a great, just bring me the money without me going through.
Without making me headache, yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's a great quality. Emily, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Emily. How are you?
Good.
Yeah. So what are the qualities for you as a right PM?
I want someone that was very organized and also very has the attention to details and also has the entrepreneurial mindset, because they can really help me optimize the performance of my listing, not just to deal with day-to-day operations.
That sounds like kind of coincide with what Cindy said. So basically, don't bring me the headache, but bring me the revenue, right? So because you're organized, you have attention to details, and you are able to sort everything out without you going through the headache. That makes sense. So let's go to the PM. So to the PM, what are your job duties, including the ones that most people may not know about? Because we may think this is what you do, but you actually have a lot to do behind the scene. So Allison, are you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Allison.
Okay. Hi. You know what? Believe it or not, I'm a property manager and I am still on the go. I am still driving. So this is a typical property manager day. Well, most of the people are already home enjoying their dinner. So being a property manager, I think the most important thing is being responsible. That is the most important thing. A unresponsible person will not make a good property manager. That is the number one criteria for property manager. And secondly, just like the two hosts said, the homeowner said, you want someone who is, detail oriented, well organized, to be your property manager, because there are so many things happens to manage your property. While you see a big chunk of money depositing to your bank account at the end of month or at the beginning of each month, there are actually a lot of things happening, behind that, transfer, behind that deposit. So you want to make sure your property manager is capable of handling all this kind of things.
That's great. So basically, we know that besides transferring money, there are things, paperwork or follow-ups. Yeah. So how about Chao? Chao, are you here?
Yeah.
Hi, Chao. So besides whatever we think you are doing, what do you think there are other duties that most people may not know about?
Okay, there's another very important thing. One is standardization. Another thing is manage your team, to serve for the customer. Yeah, because I think maybe 80% of my my employee is do the standardization, maybe 20 or 30%, just reply the text, contact the cleaner, there's more stuff in the backend, but a lot of hosts do not know that.
Okay, so building a team is important because for one person to run around may not be having enough energy to handle all the things without losing sight to details, right? Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. So to both host and the PM, so what is the difference in a PM that specializes in short-term versus long-term rentals? I guess I will ask, Allison and also Chow, are you doing both short-term and long-term rentals, or are you just doing short-term right now?
Okay, well, I guess I'm the right person to ask because I do both.
That's great. So, and Allison, you want to tell us about the main difference,
Yeah,
like
I'll tell you,
from your job function and everything? Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually my second time being here. I guess I'm one of the most experienced property manager in the Bay Area, because I have more than 5 years of experience both in short-term and long-term rental experience. So what I want to say is, first, you want to know your property and you want to know your goal. For example, what's your main goal? To make money regardless of risk, or to have your property rented as safe as possible? And second, is your property suitable for long-term, or is your property suitable for short-term? Those are all those questions that you want to ask yourself before making the decision. For example, let me make some example for short-term rental. For long-term rental, people always know, nice houses in like nice neighborhood, in nice school district will have a good value. And of course, you probably will have a great tenant who's gonna stay in your house for 2 to 5 years, and then give you continuous income of long-term rental. But for short-term rental, what do? Maybe you have a house in a not so nice neighborhood, or let's say in a very bad neighborhood. What are you going to do? Are you going to rent it to people that looks sketchy? Or what you should do? Probably you should think about short-term rental, because short-term rental tenants, or let's say guests, they don't care about school district. Probably they will care more about commute. They will care more about public transportation. They will care more about if you have certain restaurant around that area. So first make the decision on your property. And second, you want to see if on your property, is it a condo, it's a townhouse, or it's a single family house with HOA, or it's a single family house without HOA. That is important because as far as I know, a lot of properties in the Bay Area doesn't allow short-term rental because the HOA doesn't allow any rental that less than 30 days. And then the third part is is the owner money driven? Do you want to make for, and also is the owner, like say, risk tolerant? Because running short-term rental, you will do a lot of investment. For example, you will invest probably 15K to 20K in furnitures, in remodeling of your home, and in other things. So you do need to invest some money before you even started making money. So ask yourself that question first, if that's something you want to do short-term rental. And also, besides HOA regulations and rules, CCNRs, you probably want to check with your local city rules and regulations to see if short-term rental is allowed there, and if you need to apply any permit or any license for short-term rental. And then the third part is neighborhood relationship. Before rent your home for long term, relatively that's easier because the tenant will stay. We will not have ever-changing people living there. But then for short-term rental, you want to talk to your neighbors. You want to make sure your neighbors are satisfied, or your neighbors will not give you a hard time because people who are living in your house is changing, say, every week or twice a week. Otherwise, then probably if you piss your neighbor off, then probably your neighbor will try to either file a claim, to the city and try to nitpick on you. For example, your front line is not doing well, you're using too much water, and then this and that. So you want to make sure, we'll think about all this criteria before making the decision.
That's great. That's basically from the landlord perspective, what you need to think about. What about Cindy? You are mostly in short-term rentals. From your perspective, what are you looking for the traits from the PM for short-term versus long-term? If you were to do long-term as well, what are the specific traits? What's the difference in the PM that you think it would be?
Okay, that's a good question. I think I would evaluate two things. First is the difference of the revenue. Second is the difference of the headache, right? So the difference of revenue means like if I do long-term rental, if I earn $100, why? So if short-term rental, can I make the gross rental at least 150, right? If yes, I may try it. If no, it's not worth it because the short-term rental bring you more efforts needed and then more cost. So the second is the headache because, for example, you need to care about whether legal-wise it's okay. Otherwise, if you break the law, you got more troubles. Second is whether you have a trustworthy PM, right, for you to handle it. So not all the area in US could have a trustworthy PM groups. If not, probably not a good place to do short-term rental investment. But if yes, you can try it, right? And the third thing is like the cost, because different houses have a different cost. For example, if it's near the beach, a party house, right? Your gross rental looks really high, but then the maintenance cost is also really high. So you need to carefully do the calculations and understand the potential revenue, understand the potential headache, and ask yourself whether the headache is something you are affordable to you and whether the revenue difference is higher enough to worth it.
That's great. So we want to maximize the revenue and minimize the cost and also minimize the headache. Emily, do you do a lot of long-term rentals too, or only the short-term at this time?
Okay, yeah. So I'd actually do both long-term rental and short-term rental. I think it's a different type of investment concept. For the long-term rental, honestly, you're basically just getting away from all the hassles and just collect the money. You're not really optimized. I would say at least for my property, I'm not really betting on getting like amazing cash flow from the long-term rental. I basically just want the cash flow to be balanced so that I can take advantage of the appreciation. For short-term rental, I usually do this in the vacation rental areas where it's more tourism heavy, and you can actually adjust the price or spike the price during the holiday season or hot season to bring you more cash flow. So I would say it's very different type of investment concept. In terms of the traits that, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say. So when you're looking for the PM, so what the traits are you looking for each different types of rental?
I think, so I think short-term rental is a lot more operations heavy as compared to long-term rental. For long-term rental, the type of efforts you put in is typically during the initial setup and like finding the right tenants and getting the house ready. Once they moved in, once you find a good tenant, once they moved in, the hassle is actually pretty minimal. Especially, and I've actually done this, I leverage the long-term, I sometimes find a long-term rental PM are pretty busy during the first 3 to 4 months of the rent. Afterwards, like they only get a call from the tenant probably about 1 or twice a quarter. Like the type of things that for them to manage is pretty minimum. As compared to short-term rental, you are actively talking to the guests. You need to do the check-in, check-out. You need to make sure that guests obey the property rules. It's a lot more operations heavy. So in terms of the PM I'm looking for, the risk of not getting a good PM is much higher if you do short-term rental as compared to long-term rental. For long-term rental, like it's not very likely that you're gonna screw things up. But for short-term rental, if you don't have a good PM, you are very screwed because you will have tons of headache. So I'm looking for someone that was really, really, really attention to details, respond to my message. I think I agree with Alex 100% that I want someone that was very responsive. And I also want someone that actually cares about the listing performance. There are people who just basically do the day-to-day operations and not really think about how to optimize the listing performance. That's not something that I prefer. So I would say I really double click on attention to details, really like organize, have a good process that they can follow to welcome and to host the guests, and also someone who cares about the listing performance.
That sounds good. I have something I want to share. I think when you mentioned that short-term rental, you get immediate loss if there's non-performance. I guess the pain you can feel the pain right away. But for the long-term rental, even though you don't feel the pain right away, but if you don't have a good PM, if you got a bad tenant, I think that pain is actually more because it's hard to get rid of a tenant, right? So the pain's there no matter whether it's long-term or short-term. So question to the PM. So Chow, you hear all the requirements or the wish list from the host. What do you wish the host would have understood you better? Or do you think the host have any unreasonable expectation from you?
Yes, because the basically concept, from long-term, short-term is totally different. For the working, I think it's if you run a short-term, maybe what you're doing maybe 5 times than the the long-term, but the host never know. So secondly, the concept, Airbnb, more like a commercial, so the price, in winter and the summer, the price, in the summer maybe double, from the winter, it's totally different. So first, I think all the hosts, never do business should buy some book, from Amazon, maybe just $10. I also had some book, at the first time, I always share my video and the book, to the new Airbnb host, to learn first and then talk to me. Otherwise, there's a lot of basic concept, we are not on the same page, so we cannot talk, happily.
As you say, don't just go by what internet says. Don't just go by what the book says, right? So we have to see what the reality is. So Allison, what do you wish hosts would have understand you better? Or do you think the hosts have any unreasonable expectations from what you hear from Cindy and also Emily? Allison? Yeah.
Similar thing as for example, being like a lot of people doing short-term rental, but for the most of the time, they're looking for revenues. Okay, they're looking for more money. So a lot of them are, getting this information, say from WeChat, from Little Red Book, from Pinterest, from Facebook, or from friends' mouths. They're saying, "Oh, I'm making say $15,000 in 1 month. Oh, I'm making money." Is my going to make that much money? But that is the question. It's first, it's truly short-term rental is ever changing. It's just like,
I think Allison has very bad connection, but I hear you. So don't just go by what internet or social media says. We have to do our market analysis and really understand the market before we judge the PM, whether the PM is doing a good job or not. I think that's.
I can give some more points or repeat Allison's point. I was like, okay, so how to pick the right PM? You need to do your own due diligence, including like to really dig out what exactly the revenue can make from your house. For example, if you don't simply trust if another big house nearby you this month can earn like $2,000 and you think it's a lot, but actually your house maybe that house have a water view and your house doesn't. Even they're nearby, it can make completely a game changer, right? So different revenue, or sometimes the seasonality is strong, right? As spring last month, spring break is March, and then Florida house near Disney can make a lot of money. But then the yearly avenue, monthly avenue is totally not that high. Or maybe like the house is they have a lot of gross rental incomes, but then the damage is also a lot. So actually the cash flow is not fancy as its rental incomes. So Alan's point is like, and sometimes the people, they exaggerate like their incomings from short-term rentals. They're not telling the truth, or they only tell the cherry picking part. So just don't really simply trust some messages from a person or from your some WeChat message or posting or ads or something. Just do your due diligence. Okay, and then back to the topic, how to pick your right PM, right? Like you can ask your PM whether you are hosting a similar house in the similar area. If yes, please give me the revenue of the last 1 year. You need to look at the low season and the high season, right? If your PM give you a number which looks amazing, but then she or he couldn't give you the real listing address and then monthly breakdown revenues, then don't hire the PM. It's not solid enough, you know.
So that's a very good point. So when you do your due diligence, you actually ask for the history of the past listings so that you can see the real cases, not just from what you heard from social media or somebody bragging.
Not just listen, because people sometimes only tell the good part, you know.
And it's okay to share, right? For PM to share the past listing history, right?
The PM can share it by anonymous some PII information, right?
Okay. That's actually a very good point. That's something good to learn, because then it's not about what you think the average is, but it's about real listing. So, and then we'll try to understand what the difference between your listing versus your potential listing versus this already existing listing. You know, if they are similar, you should have reasonable expectation. You should get reasonably should be expecting similar cash flow as well. That's great. Emily, so when you have different day in Texas, or you have short-term rentals in Hawaii, you know, so what would you say that for you, your selection, like when your selection criteria, or would you judge them so that you hope that your host will be able to help you the most, your PM will help you the most?
Yeah, I think that the other guests kind of talk about the majority of things. I just wanted to add a couple of things. Just as Cindy, I did a lot of homework. I actually talked to the PM and I try to see what is like I ask questions about, I give them some scenarios and ask them how they would handle it. So for example, if the guest is asking for cancellations very last minute, how would you handle it? These are the real examples. And if they are good and experienced PMs, they should be able to answer that. And you can very easily see if they are experienced or not based on their answer. So that's one. I also asked them to share some of the listings they hosted. And I take a look at the reviews. I sometimes will read the guest reviews to see if, for example, if there is a low score review, was it more because of the property manager or something else? So for example, if guests are saying that like the cleaner that doesn't finish the work on time, or like the PM is not responding in a timely manner, that says a lot about a PM. So I do check the reviews for the historical listings they manage, and usually it actually tells a lot. And another interesting thing that I see, I sometimes, when I have time, I even actually try, if a PM actually hosts multiple listings, I actually take a look at the reviews over time. So like, for example, it's very easy, or it's very likely that a PM will get not so good reviews. As a new PM, there are things that they need to learn. But if the same mistake or similar mistakes happens over and over again across multiple listings they have managed and over time, that tells me that there is the person is probably not learning. And second is that they don't have the process, because if you have the right process, these human errors should be able to pick up. And I am okay with people making mistakes for the first couple of times, but there needs to be a way that the mistakes gets learned and gets corrected themselves. So those are a couple, I think, very interesting things that I look for when I'm trying to find the PM.
That's a great point. So let's ask our PM. So Allison, if there is a last minute cancellation, what would you do?
That's pretty easy, if last minute cancellation from the guest, pretty much for all our listings, our strict cancellation policy, which means if the guests cancel at the last minute, they don't get their money back, or they get very minimal money back. So what we do is, we'll accept the cancellation. We'll tell the guest that, we follow Airbnb cancellation policy. We will give the money to the owner, of course, after deducting our management fee. And then, when the guests cancel, your calendar opened it up. And then you have a chance to host another group of guests. And you probably will be making double the income of one, calendar. This is the beauty of short-term rental. And it happens a lot, okay? I'll tell you guys, it happens a lot in my, career path. It happens a lot. So that's why owners of short-term rental are pretty happy.
That's great. So Chow, how would you handle for the last minute cancellation?
Yeah, for the cancellation, it's first you need to invest, what's more popular siting on the market, almost, I think most of the city, maybe 40 or 50% of the cancellation is flexible. Flexible mean if you cancel, maybe just charge you 1 day more. So all of my listing, citing just follow the market. Second, if the guest just cancel but never talk to us, just charge 1 more day. And if the guest talk to us, most of the time, we will fully refund. Because because why? Because review is more important. And sometimes, if the guest is unhappy, something like that, we may almost always refund some money, for the better review.
Okay, so Allison's very adamant about charging the full rent and then get even double for the income. But Charles thinks that it's good to refund the money so we can get better reviews. So how do you handle the reviews, Allison?
Yeah. If I can tell on the cancellation, just one more thing. So yeah, as you can clearly see that this is the beauty of the interviews. Like, just different PMs will handle things very differently. There is no good and bad, right or wrong, but it's very interesting. And one example is that so I actually have a guest that cancels very last minute. I basically said that I will stick to the cancellation policy and not refund. So as a result, so that person reached out to me, wanted to cancel, and I told her that because it's literally 1 day before the check-in. So I said I unfortunately cannot honor the full refund. And instead, that guest just did not check in, and he leave a really bad review, just saying that like the listing is very bad, like the cancellation policy is not flexible enough. So then although I'm a pretty experienced host, I actually don't know this. So I got very upset, and I asked this in one of the host group. I said, like, what should we do? And actually one of the very experienced PM respond to me and say that you can actually contact Airbnb. You provide the proof that this guest never checked in, and Airbnb was able to remove this review from the total review. This is because it's basically 1 day before the check-in date. So it's against the community rules. I did try that, it does work. So I think one thing that I wanted to also say here is that in general, I think that Airbnb does a lot of work to protect and help the host, to make the host life easier. And I did not know this before this experience. The PM tell me this. So that's another interesting story about like experience a PM, and different PM handle things differently. And that's the beauty of like getting to know different PMs.
But sometimes Airbnb is not guaranteed that can help you, right? So in case this doesn't happen, how do you handle this, Allison, for when you are adamant about your cancellation policy?
All right. Emily, is that me who told you that you can call Airbnb to take off the bad review? Probably, huh? So what I want to say is, in my experience, I host probably more than 50,000 group of guests, okay, in my past years of experience. What I can say is I don't buy reviews, okay? Which means, no, I'm not gonna pay money to buy a good review. It just doesn't worth it. There's few things you can do, you know. First, you can publicly respond. You know, you can publicly respond to the bad review. For example, people saying that, hey, I canceled my reservation, but the host didn't give me my money back. You can publicly respond to that. Yes, because I follow the Airbnb cancellation policy. That's it. You know, you need to stick with your policy. You stick with, you know, your cancellation policy. There's nothing wrong with sticking with it. And second part is the most property that, you know, I would say all the property that I manage, the quality of the property stand out for itself. So I don't need to buy for good reviews. But I know, because I know Chow's business. Chow's business is slightly different from ours. We are a full management short-term rental management company. So we know our listing from inside out. We know the quality of our houses. However, I think Chow is managing someone else's property. So he might not be able to know all the story behind the scene. And that is why we have different strategies towards cancellation policy. And that is why it is important to the homeowners to pick up, you know, the property manager that is suitable to your property, because, you know, you might you know, need a full service property management company like me, or you may have a you know, partial or, you know, or let's say on service property management company like Chow's.
What if they have a very valid reason? So like during COVID, right? So the COVID reason actually validates the refund. So how do you guys handle that?
Okay, well, if it is valid, and if there's, let me put it this way, if there's a 1 penny that I can fight for my client, that if I can fight for my owner, I will fight for it. And there's a Chinese saying, okay, 谈钱伤感情，谈感情伤钱. Every time when people ask me if I should refund money to those poor people who had to cancel at the last, you know, at the last minute, I always say that to them. I said, don't, because you're doing short-term rental for profit. If you want to do something good to make yourself feel happy, to make yourself feel better, then, you know, donate some money to some non-profit organization. But if you have cancellations, anything like this, let me handle it. I will stick with my cancellation policy.
And there's one point. Who is the #1 client of a PM? The host, not the guest. Right? To be clear, super clear about it. If your PM put the guest as the first, don't hire the PM.
Yes, exactly.
The first client.
Exactly, I agree. That's why,
yeah.
You know.
So I think during the first stage of the pandemic, when pandemic just started, Airbnb had the extenuating circumstances policy, which is that if your areas falls under the pandemic areas, and there are certain rules that you can basically go through the cancellation without having to contact the PMs, and all the monies are fully refunded. These days, I think that we actually Airbnb actually retreat that. We no longer have that, because I actually tend to agree with Allison Allison and Cindy in certain degree that we want to ensure consistency for all the guests. And the best way of ensuring consistency is to stick to the rules. Otherwise, you start to make human judgment. You're saying that, hey, this person sounds more real in her story about cancellation, so I should honor this one. That person's cancellation is, let's say, like 29 days instead of 30 days before the check-in, so I should warrant that one. Then you don't really have a good rule, and you are essentially not treating every guest equally. And the more that you introduce these inconsistency, the more likely you're going to make mistakes. So that's why I actually tend to agree with Allison and Cindy that it's either you just stick to the cancellation policy, or if you really want to make it flexible, you just change the cancellation policy to be flexible so that everyone can just cancel very last minute.
And that's a good point. Just really make sure we have the consistency and have a system in place and follow the system instead of trying to make changes unless we change the system.
Yeah.
But for long-term rental, this is what I heard. When the long-term rental, if you have somebody breaking the lease, and if you are able to find a replacement tenant, then you can actually only go after the person who break the lease, only go after for the damage, the actual damage. So it means that if you are immediately found a tenant, the previous tenant does not have to pay for the whole amount of the lease. Is that right? Chow or Allison, you want to comment on that for long term?
Yes, that's true. That's what I do too.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if it doesn't really happen that much in my career. It doesn't happen that much because I am very, very, very cautious about tenant selection. But if it does happen, it just basically we need to find a substitute, a substitute tenant for the lease, and then the current tenant will just need to pay until we find the right and qualified substitute. He doesn't need to pay anything else. That's what I usually do. Or I know some other company, usually that this happens in leasing offices, of a apartment complex. They usually say, hey, if you want to break the lease, you just pay extra 2 months of rent, and then you can just walk away. That's so it depends. It depends, but it just there's some remedy for homeowners if the long-term tenant walk away. There are, so don't worry.
Yeah.
In the worst case scenario, there are deposit.
Got it. So sometimes I heard, so for long-term tenant, if they sign the lease and then found out, oh, I heard about the story of Mode, for example, a student housing at Berkeley. And then they heard about the story of Mode, so they decided they are not comfortable in leasing that anymore. Can they back out safely, or do they actually have to pay for the damages, for the security deposit and also the PM acquisition fees, things like that?
What, did they move in?
No, not moved in yet. Just that they signed the lease, but then they are about to move in for the summer. Well, they're not yet, getting ready to move into summer, and I heard about the story saying, hey, this building used to have mold. They flooded before, so so they felt very uncomfortable, so they decided to back out from the lease. Is that something? So, yeah.
All right. So it's a question, depending on the property manager as well as the owner. What does she or what does he want? Because everyone knows the California laws are protecting tenant much more than the owner. So if they want to go, let them go, and then put your unit on the market again. And I'm sure you will find someone to rent again, especially in Berkeley. You don't want to find unhappy tenants move in and keep giving you trouble. And then the worst case scenario, and the tenant, what if the tenant decided to squat? They just squat your unit and not paying anything. That the owner is screwed much more than the owner's screwed and literally financially damaged much more than just letting the tenant go and finding new tenants. I'm sure the same thing happens on real estate market. What if a buyer gets in contract and then the buyer get cold feet and want to go? Well, let the buyer go, and then put the listing back on market. Someone will find it and someone will buy it eventually. The same thing. It's real estate.
Okay, so for that, I have 2 comments. Number 1, to comment on your buyer having cold feet. This is actually our next seminar about contingencies and buyer having cold feet and backing out. I actually invited real estate attorney to talk about, can you really do that for cold feet? The seller really can just let buyer go and then collect another offer. What if the market shifted already? And what if they're getting lower offer? So the answer may not be just letting them go. So let's hear what attorney will say in my next session. The second comment I want to make on the mode situation. So yes, the potential tenant is complaining about the mode situation for the building, but guess what? It's an apartment building. I think the apartment buildings are equipped with very strong attorney force, so it's actually pretty hard to get out. So that's why I was trying to figure out, maybe individual home and then they want to go, let them go. But with apartment, is it really worth the fighting? Just say, hey, really, the kids don't feel comfortable in moving, and do you let them go? Or the apartment would actually make them pay for the security deposit and also PM acquisition fees. So I guess it also depends on who the PM is, who the landlord is as well, right? So Chao, you have any comments on this?
Sorry, I do not do long term, but I have comments, about the previous question, the root, the foundation of the Airbnb, is let the guest happy. The owner, you just concern, the revenue. Yeah.
Yeah, so Airbnb came from like people leaving, the traditional Airbnb, right? People leaving the house and make them feel like home. So I see your point, and then but when we want to make it a business, it's always hard to try to be adamant about certain things. So I guess it's also up to the landlord, what landlord wants to do as well. Yeah. So to the host, Cindy and Emily, what do you want out of a PM that is not already being obvious and already being talked about? Something, I guess, something behind the scene as well. What do you want out of a PM? Yeah.
Okay, maybe Emily can go first because I always go first.
Yeah, Emily. I think you want a system, right? Emily, you want a system, want something really stick to the system, being consistent. What else you want out of a PM that is not already very obvious?
I think experienced with hosting Airbnb, hosting short-term rental. Like I said, I want someone that treats the unit like a business. So for example, in my interview, I also asked them, what is your pricing strategy? How do you figure out what is the right price for your unit? And also the price should be adjusted accordingly, not just by seasonality, but also, for example, by how much supply is in the market. The closer it is getting to the check-in date, the supply-demand dynamics changes. So a good PM, if he has time, a good PM should be able to talk about the different elements that he or she would look into to consider the pricing. And if there is anything that he or she would like basically change the price or adjust the price. So that is something that when I say entrepreneurial, that's something that I mean, is like someone who cares about the listing performance and can think about how to best optimize for the performance.
That's a good point. Yeah, Cindy.
Okay, there was one thing I care. It's subtle, but what I care is the PM's long-term mindset for the whole short-term rental community. Because, for example, if a PM they host big parties, right, in the Airbnb house, when the house is not a good place for the big parties, but then the PM still do it, and then short-term wise, you may earn, the PM may earn a lot of commission fees, and then you may have a lot of gross rental income in the rent, but then later on you may get complaint from your neighbors, right, and then police may come to your house and talk to you, and then you may be forced to unleash your house, or you even got some lawsuits because of that, right? And then you bring the bad reputation to the whole short-term rental communities, and then you may even trigger like the government to make new laws be against the short-term rental, and then start bad circulations. So I think my point is like I want some long-term mindset that the PM cares whether he can help you to run your short rental in a long-term way, sustainable ways, rather than just maximize like the short-term periods incomings, regardless of what the consequence and the cost is.
That's a great point. So short-term rental, but long-term goal.
Yeah,
goal is still,
long-term goal.
Yes, it's always for making money in the long run, not just making money in the short run. Yeah.
Sustainable way. Yeah.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah. So to the PMs, so what should a host do to give you the support that you're looking for? Chow?
Yeah. First, I think for the professional, real estate investor, you just focus on the data, but not the emotional. The emotional is not good, for the daily operation. Yeah. For the second one, I think all the hosts should study the basic concept, the Airbnb operation. I always will because I hack several books. I will send the book to every of my hosts, to study.
That's great. And then Allison?
Okay, here we go. Well, I would say 2 words, trust and patient.
Okay.
So yeah, so if whoever, for the owner, whoever you decided to choose as your property manager, give that property manager some time, because like I said, short-term rental is fluctuates. The good season, good holiday season like December, and bad season like say February, they're so different. They could be like, the difference could be like 100%, 200%. So what I say is, those property managers, like myself or other property managers from all different companies, we're the professionals, and we're doing this for profit, for business. Our goal is to run a successful short-term rental so that both the owner and the property manager could benefit from it, to get paid from it. So the goal of short-term rental owner and short-term rental manager are the same. And then, so that's why I say, trust. And also second part is patient. Like I said, it fluctuates. So every short-term rental, if the owner, you decided to do short-term rental, please give out at least 1 year to that property to run short-term rental, so you can run a whole cycle of the short-term rental. You will know, when you're expecting more income and when you're expecting less income. Don't just try it for like 2 months and then probably you're in the low season and then you're like, oh, short-term rental is not worth trying. It's not generating enough income. Well, probably you're wrong because you're not just at the right time. So those 2 things, I think, is what I'm expecting from the homeowners: trust and patience.
1 year seems to be super long to get a result. I think Cindy and Emily will be will be going crazy, right? So maybe if we give 1 year, maybe will be too long to see the whole cycle. I think a good advice for potential host will be plan for the worst. So when we try to buy some short-term rentals, we have to understand what is the worst case scenario so that we don't have to wait for a year to decide if that's the right property. So if we decided, okay.
In general, Coco, in general, like all properties are usually not worse than long-term rental. But of course, you need to factor in like your investment in furniture and all other things, right?
Correct.
But
Mhm.
but in general, I don't think 1 year is too long, because you won't experience that much of let's say financial damage at all with that 1 year.
Can I add some comment?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because you can do the research. You do not need 1 year. First, you can buy some data from Airbnb. They will list the top 5, top 10 the performance. Secondly, you can do the research also by yourself. Find some similar house, find some similar penthouse near you. Write down all the daily price. I think do the investigation first, and you can. So you do not need to run for 1 year.
Yeah, we had experience with some PM before. Actually, Cindy and I, and also Emily, we all experienced a same PM in the past. So, and then we had some frustration, and I think with 1 year will be too long to wait for the PM to perform. So I think it's a good idea to understand what's our worst case scenario, so that even during the worst case scenario, this property would either make reasonable amount of money to justify this rental, or actually it makes pretty decent income, so that any peak season will be even better. So that's how I see this. Cindy and Emily, you have any comments on that in terms of how you see the return, like how quickly you wish to see the return from the PM or from the property?
I think first, Charles, he made a really good point, right? You don't need to get the data just by experience yourself, right? You get data from Airbnb, you get data from other short-term rental survey data platform, or especially you should get the data from the PM you are planning to hire. So this should be a part of one of the important interview questions when you are picking your PMs. Is like, back to my point is, have you ever hosted the similar a house in the area? And what is their income in the high and low seasons? So by that, you actually can quickly get a 1 year or 2 year data in a short term.
That's great. Emily, how did you deal with that? And how do you deal with the PM and decide if the PM is performing or not?
I actually give probably about 3 to 6 months, but no more than 6 months. Because I'm this type of person that I honestly would like to be hands-off as much as possible. I have a busy life, and I would like to be able to just close my eyes and collect the money. That's it. But also, if you because it's still your revenue, so you still cared about it. Because you cared about it, if it's not performing, you start to become micromanaging. So I really wanted to say that sometimes there are people who tend to micromanage like by habit. I'm this type of person that if I trust someone, I will not micromanage. I only micromanage if I sense that things is not going right. And I do not enjoy that because it's not something that I wanted to spend my daily life on. So I typically will give 3 to 6 months to gauge how good a PM is, in a degree that how effective he or she is in like handling requests. How much do I really need to be involved? If I need to be involved in like almost every single decision, that actually sucks. So yeah, so that's kind of my time frame to evaluate a PM.
Great. I guess there's really no right or wrong answer because everybody works a little bit differently. So that's why we call it, find the right property manager for you. And so everybody's criteria is a little bit different. Time really flies. I think we had a great discussion. It's almost to the end. So if you have any questions, not too late, if you can send it to us so we can actually present to our host. I wanted to take this time to give everyone the preview of our following seminar. So remember, we're talking about the buyer getting cold feet. It's all about contingencies. So we have had a very hot real estate market in the recent years, and everyone sees non-contingent offers for any properties on the market. So what are the contingencies and what happens if the buyer have cold feet and want to back out in a non-contingent situation. So what will happen to the buyer's deposit? Either buyer already made the deposit, or sometimes they haven't even made the deposit yet. They just have the cold feet and want to walk away. So as I mentioned earlier, I have invited a real estate attorney to address the concerns from consumers. So please be sure to tune in and watch our next seminar. That seminar will not be recorded, so you have to join live, learn, and ask questions. So let me see if anybody has any questions. If not any questions, it's almost 6:30. So I got some questions. What is the right management fee for a short-term property PM on top of the Airbnb fee if PM provides all supplies like toilet papers, coffee, things like that?
There isn't no one answer for the right thing. I can only tell you, for example, for Bay Area, like 20% is the most typical ones. But you hear the revenue eventually. For example, if one PM can earn 200 and charge 25, and the other can only earn 100 but charge 20, obviously you will pick the first one, right? So I would say 20 is the most typical numbers, but it's always case by case.
Probably something between 15% to 25%.
25, yeah, is this range is most common range. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. How about PM? Does PM provide any supplies, or who pays for the supplies?
It's also case by case, but for my cases, PM pays for it because typically they it's part of the cleaning fee, you know. So the cleaning fee in charge of cleaning the property as well as refill the supply like shampoo, paper tissue or something. And sometimes your PM can also spend $5 or $10 to prepare a small welcome gift.
Yeah, sometimes I see my PM would provide some gifts for the guests so that they can actually get better reviews, probably.
Yeah, get better reviews, right? It depends on your what's the nightly rate. If it's like, for example, Hawaii condo is only like 120 per night, then probably you need to pay for it. That makes sense for the PM to pay for it. But if it's a high end, like 1,000 per night, typically like the PM pay for it.
Oh, I don't even know actually we paid for the
the PM charges. I can tell you who the PM charges, but the PM you are hiring is not charging it.
Okay, you can tell how hands off I am. Don't even know what I actually paid.
Okay. The charge starts $15 per gift.
Okay, I don't check my bill. I will. And then yeah, so if anyone wants to get more information, feel free to email me, or if you are able to scan the QR code, we can put my email address in the chat and you can email me. I can also make referral for you to get to know our hosts. Then you can, maybe we can talk about more, discuss more on short-term or long-term PM experience of a property in either Santa Clara County or in the Bay Area or in the whole country, you know, Texas or Hawaii or anywhere you wanted to hear. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming. This actually concludes our seminar. Thank you so much for your time, Cindy, Emily, Allison, and Chow. Thank you for taking your time. So we will stop recording right now and allow ourselves to unmute so that you can say thank you to our guests. I will also see all of you at our next seminar or our open house. Thank you again and have a great evening.